The cameras were rolling, the lights were blinding, and the tension inside CNN's studio felt thick enough to slice with a knife. Viewers across America tuned in expecting a routine morning broadcast, but what they got was chaos, pure and unfiltered. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, sat across from Anderson Cooper, poised but fiery, determined to reclaim the narrative. Within minutes, it was clear. This was no ordinary interview. Sparks flew, words collided, and what began as polite back-and-forth spiraled into a war of egos that would dominate headlines for weeks. Anderson, sharp as ever, didn't waste time. He leaned forward, eyebrows arched, his tone edged with challenge. "Meghan, isn't it true that your story keeps changing?" The studio gasped. Meghan's smile froze and her eyes narrowed with the kind of glare that could silence a room. She shot back, her voice dripping with defiance. "No, Anderson. What keeps changing is the media's obsession with twisting my truth." Her words sliced the air, but Anderson was relentless. Suddenly, the control room's frantic whispers could be heard faintly through the feed. Producers knew. This was slipping out of control, but no one dared cut away. The nation was glued to the screen, watching in disbelief as royalty clashed with one of America's most seasoned anchors in real time. Then it happened. Meghan's hand slammed against the armrest, her voice rising over Anderson's interjections. "You don't get to silence me," she shouted, eyes blazing. Anderson countered immediately. "And you don't get to rewrite history on live television." The studio erupted in a mixture of gasps and muffled laughter from stunned staffers. Viewers at home leaned forward, hearts pounding, as the confrontation turned explosive. This was no interview. This was a showdown. The tension had reached boiling point, and by now, millions of viewers were clutching their coffee mugs with trembling hands. Meghan leaned forward, her voice shaking not with fear, but with fury. "Anderson, you sit there behind your desk acting like the gatekeeper of truth, when in reality, you're just another cog in the media machine that's been profiting off tearing me down." The audience watching at home felt the sting in her words, like arrows flung straight into the heart of CNN itself. Anderson, never one to retreat, smirked coldly. "Profiting, Meghan. You've built a global empire by playing the victim card. Don't you dare accuse journalists of twisting the narrative when you've mastered it yourself." His tone was sharp, his words dripping with accusation. The air inside the studio thickened as the live broadcast threatened to combust into full-scale verbal warfare. Suddenly, Meghan stood. Her chair screeched against the polished floor, the microphone catching every jarring sound. She towered over Anderson, her presence commanding the stage as though she were in a royal courtroom. "I will not be belittled by you. Not here, not now, not ever," she thundered. Anderson didn't flinch. He rose too, standing eye to eye with the Duchess, their faces inches apart, the cameras catching every bead of sweat, every flicker of rage. The control room panicked. Cut to commercial. Too late. The live feed was unstoppable, and America was witnessing a battle unlike anything seen on morning television. And just when the shouting seemed unbearable, Anderson delivered the line that would echo across social media. "If you can't handle tough questions, Meghan, maybe you don't belong here, on this set or in this conversation." The audience fell silent. Meghan's jaw tightened, and the world held its breath. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of studio equipment. Meghan's eyes burned with outrage, her lips pressed tight as if holding back a storm. Then, with a sudden sharp inhale, she unleashed it. "You dare say I don't belong. Anderson, I've been shoved out of palaces, cornered by tabloids, and hounded across continents. Yet here I stand. Don't you dare think you can dismiss me on live television." Anderson folded his arms, his gaze icy. "Standing doesn't mean standing strong, Meghan. It means you refuse to admit when the narrative no longer holds water. People are tired of the rehearsed victimhood. They want accountability. The words stung. Meghan's hand trembled as she pointed directly at him, her voice vibrating with venom. Accountability? For what? For telling the truth? For surviving a system that chews women up and spits them out? If you want accountability, Anderson, take a look in the mirror. How many lives has the media destroyed just to keep ratings alive? The studio staff exchanged nervous glances. The boom mic hovered uncertainly. No one dared intervene. The clash had shifted from a heated interview to a duel, a fight for credibility on a global stage. Suddenly, Meghan leaned closer, her voice dropping to a razor-sharp whisper that still carried through the broadcast. You think you intimidate me. You're nothing but a puppet. And I've cut enough strings in my life to recognize one when I see it. Anderson's nostrils flared. His voice snapped back louder than ever. And you, Meghan, are addicted to the spotlight. You crave it, even when it scorches. Don't pretend you're above the circus. You built the tent yourself. Gasps rippled through the studio. Social media exploded. The showdown was only beginning. The words hung in the air like poison, and Meghan's face flushed crimson. Her fists clenched at her sides, her voice trembling with rage. How dare! You, Anderson. You don't know what I've endured. You don't know the nights I cried, the times I wanted to disappear, the relentless hounding of a world that would rather see me broken than hear me speak. Her voice cracked, raw and unfiltered, but the fury in her eyes never dimmed. Anderson, sensing the rawness of her confession, leaned in like a predator circling its prey. You want sympathy, Meghan? Sympathy doesn't excuse contradictions. Sympathy doesn't erase the fact that every time you tell your story, the details shift just enough to make headlines, and you know it. Meghan's jaw tightened. She slammed, her palm flat against the desk, the echo ringing across the set like a gavel of defiance. Those shifts, she shouted, aren't contradictions, they're evolutions. A woman healing, a woman surviving, a woman daring to grow in public. How dare you weaponize my pain against me? Anderson rose again, his voice booming with authority. You're not being silenced, Meghan. You're being challenged. There's a difference. And if you can't tell, maybe the truth isn't as solid as you'd like the world to believe. The control room was in meltdown. Producers screamed into headsets begging for a cut to commercial, but the feed blazed on. The studio lights grew hotter, the air thicker, as though the set itself was suffocating under the pressure of two wills, colliding. And then Meghan leaned forward, her face inches from Anderson's, eyes glinting with fury. You can try to break me, but you will never erase me. Not you, not CNN, not anyone. The audience knew. They were witnessing history. By now, the studio felt less like a newsroom and more like a battlefield. The tension was unbearable. Meghan's breathing came heavy, her voice sharp and unyielding as she pressed on. Every time a woman dares to speak her truth, there's a man waiting to shout her down. And you, Anderson, are proving my point in front of millions. Anderson's lips curled into a sardonic half-smile. And every time the truth is inconvenient, Meghan, you twist it into victimhood. People are tired of the performance. They're tired of the rehearsed outrage. The words stung like daggers, but Meghan didn't falter. She raised her chin high, her voice booming with fury. This isn't performance. This is my life, my pain, and my fight. And if you think you can reduce me to your sound bites, you've already lost. The studio audience, producers, assistants, camera operators, sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let the storm rage on. Phones buzzed as the control room reported the chaos trending worldwide. Hashtags erupted across. Twitter clips raced across TikTok. The world wasn't just watching. It was participating in real time. And then the unthinkable happened. Meghan ripped off her microphone, the static crackling through the speakers. She threw it down with a metallic clatter, her voice no longer confined by wires. "I won't be part of this circus," she shouted, her voice echoing through the stunned studio. Anderson, undeterred, raised his voice even higher, leaning into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, you saw it here. When the questions get tough, Meghan Markle walks away." The audience gasped. Meghan spun around, her eyes blazing, her voice shaking with rage. "Don't you dare frame this as weakness. This is me refusing to play by your rules." The screen flickered. Chaos erupted. And then, blackout. When the feed cut to black, viewers thought it was over. But seconds later, the broadcast snapped back, and what they saw was chaos like never before. The cameras had kept rolling. Meghan was off her chair, pacing like a storm contained within four walls, her voice still thundering. Anderson stood firm at the desk, jaw set, refusing to look away. It was no longer an interview. It was an open brawl. Verbal warfare broadcast into living rooms across the nation. "Do you realize what you've done?" Meghan's voice cracked with fury. "You've turned this into a spectacle, a gladiator's arena, where my life is just fuel for your ratings." She gestured wildly, her hands trembling. "This isn't journalism, it's humiliation." Anderson fired back without hesitation, his words sharp as steel. "And yet, Meghan, you're still here. You thrive on this spotlight. You can call it humiliation, but let's call it what it really is: attention. And you can't survive without it." Gasps rippled through the control room as the words sliced across the air. Meghan froze, her face a mask of shock and outrage. Then, slowly, she stepped back toward him, her voice low but dangerous, every word dripping with venom. "Attention? Do you think I wanted this life? Do you think I chose to be hounded day and night? I didn't seek the spotlight. It sought me. And people like you, Anderson, made sure it never let go." The studio pulsed with raw tension. Every second felt like it might tip into something irreversible. Meghan's chest heaved as she glared at him, the weight of her words echoing through the stunned silence. And then Anderson leaned closer, his voice cold and deliberate. "Or maybe, Meghan, you just can't let go of it." The audience at home leaned forward. The fight was far from finished. The studio felt like it might implode. Meghan's eyes widened at Anderson's accusation, her lips parting in disbelief. For a fleeting second, silence blanketed the set, broken only by the relentless hum of the cameras. Then, like a tidal wave, Meghan surged back with unrestrained fury. "You think this is about clinging to fame?" she roared, her voice echoing against the studio walls. "No, Anderson. This is about survival. This is about fighting back against a world that would rather paint me as a villain than admit its cruelty." Her hands cut through the air as she spoke, each gesture sharp and fiery. Anderson didn't blink. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowed like a sniper taking aim. "Survival doesn't look like Netflix deals, book contracts, and paparazzi photo. Oops, survival doesn't look like a brand. Meghan, let's stop pretending. You've turned your struggle into a business." The words hit like a slap, and the studio gasped collectively. Meghan's cheeks flushed crimson, her breath catching in her throat. She stepped closer to him, her voice trembling but fierce. "Shame on you. Shame on you for dismissing a woman's pain as profit. Shame on you for dragging trauma into the mud just to score cheap points on television." The control room was in meltdown. "Cut to commercial now," someone shouted through the headset. But the director hesitated. The ratings were astronomical. Nobody could look away. Then Anderson delivered the cruelest blow of all. He turned to the camera, his voice cutting like glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, is this really courage, or is it just performance dressed as pain?" Meghan's face twisted with rage and hurt. The humiliation was unbearable, the nation watching her unravel live. She whispered through gritted teeth, "You'll regret this." And the cameras caught every syllable. The temperature in the studio had shifted from heated to volcanic. Meghan's whisper still lingered in the air, and the audience watching at home could feel the tension vibrating through their screens. Her eyes glistened, not with weakness but with a dangerous, simmering fury that promised she was far from finished. Anderson, sensing her unraveling, pressed his advantage. "Threats now, Meghan. That's what happens when the questions cut too deep. Not strength, not truth, just threats." His voice sliced like a knife, calculated to wound. Meghan spun toward him, her voice cracking with a mixture of fury and defiance. "No, Anderson, that wasn't a threat. That was a promise. That one day people will see you for what you are, a bully hiding behind a teleprompter." The control room gasped. Assistants exchanged panicked glances. Social media was already ablaze, hashtags multiplying by the second. Itor Meghan vs. Anderson, Itor CNN meltdown, Iwag Royal Showdown. Clips were being replayed, dissected, and memed before the broadcast even ended. And then, as if to pour gasoline on the fire, Anderson stepped out from behind his desk and faced her directly in the middle of the studio. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the two of them squared off like duelists seconds before impact. "If I'm a bully, Meghan, then you're the queen of manipulation, and America's tired of your drama." The words hit like shrapnel. Meghan's breath hitched, her entire body trembling with rage. For the first time, it looked as though she might break, not just with words, but with action. She raised a shaking finger at Anderson, her voice low and dangerous. "Say that again. I dare you." Anderson's lips curled into a half-smile. He leaned in close, just enough for the microphone to catch it. "Drama queen." The studio went silent. The world knew. The next moment would change everything. The silence after. Anderson's words was suffocating, like the moment before a thunderclap. Meghan's eyes widened, her entire frame trembling with fury. Gasps rippled through the studio crew, hands hovering nervously over equipment as if bracing for impact. The Duchess of Sussex stood frozen for a beat, then exploded with a voice that could shatter glass. "How dare you!" she bellowed, her cry reverberating through the set, shaking even the most hardened producers. She advanced toward Anderson, her heels clapping like war drums, her finger stabbing the air between them. "I have been vilified, ridiculed, crucified in the public eye. And now you, Anderson Cooper, think you can reduce me to some petty nickname? You will not." Anderson, calm but unflinching, raised his hand as if to silence the storm. "It's not a nickname, Meghan. It's the role you've written for yourself. Every tear, every headline, every staged moment, scripted to keep you relevant. You've played the part so long, you don't even know who you are anymore." The audience at home erupted, some in shock, others in applause, still others in outrage. Twitter feeds melted down, think pieces forming in real time. Was Anderson crossing a line, or was he speaking the uncomfortable truth? Meghan's voice shook, but her words lashed out with venom. "I know exactly who I am. A survivor, a woman who refused to be broken by your world of lies. And if you think you can humiliate me, you're wrong. I will not leave this stage in disgrace." The control room screamed into headsets, "Go to commercial, now!" But no one dared cut away. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every tremor, every glare. Then Anderson delivered the final strike, his words crisp and cold. "Meghan, you already have." The studio erupted in pandemonium. The eruption inside CNN's studio was unlike anything morning television had ever seen. Meghan stood shaking, her fury spilling into every corner of the room. The crew whispered in disbelief. Was this really happening live? Meghan's voice cut through the chaos like lightning. "You don't get the last word, Anderson. Not today. Not ever." But Anderson, unmoved, fired back with brutal precision. "Then say what you came here to say, Meghan. Because right now, the world is watching you collapse under your own contradictions." Her face flushed, her breath heavy. Meghan took one defiant step closer, glaring at him with the intensity of a woman who had endured storms far greater than this. "You can't silence me. You can't define me. You can't erase me." Her words trembled with both rage and vulnerability, hanging heavy in the tense studio air. Then, suddenly, the studio doors swung open. A CNN producer stormed in, waving frantically. "That's it. We're done. Cut the feed now." But the cameras were still rolling, still capturing every fragment of the historic clash. Meghan spun around, her voice raised for the nation to hear. "You wanted a spectacle? Congratulations, Anderson. You've got one. But mark my words, the only disgrace here is the way this network treats people who dare to speak their truth." The room exploded in noise, shouting staffers, buzzing equipment, the sound of control boards being slammed. Anderson stared straight into the camera one last time, his face grim. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen it with your own eyes. Meghan Markle, unfiltered, unapologetic, and unwilling to face reality." With that, the broadcast, finally, went dark. And across the world, millions of viewers were left stunned, furious, electrified. This wasn't just TV, it was a cultural earthquake. And if you want more stories that pull no punches, make sure you hit subscribe to HOA Story Sphere, because this is only the beginning.